All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Wednesday live stream. I think I want to kick things off by revisiting kind of the derailment that we had in the last stream. So last week. Let me bring up PHP Storm. Let's get that launching. Hey, Jeffrey, how's it going? Hey, Mateus, what's going on? Thanks for joining again, my noble crew here. Always coming in for me. Appreciate that. Mateus, we got a tag in the pest browser plugin. Lots of good stuff in there, I think. A couple things ended up getting reverted. I think some of the implementation probably didn't match what Nuno might have expected. So I think I'm gonna attempt to rework. For example, I think within got dropped, and I really liked that. So I think I'm gonna try to bring that back in. But anyway, yeah. Hopefully it's much better. I actually reran it. Maybe next week I might try to do it live, but convert to from Dusk to the pest browser testing. I redid it after Nuno made the tag, and my test suite got a lot farther, but it's not 100%. That within and some other things need to be in there. So anyway, now that PHP Storm has made my iMac take off, let's review what happened last week. And this blew my mind, as was clear on the stream last week. This blew my mind. This was something I did not expect within PHP. So let's go back to kind of the beginning. I was within this next shift. We made the refactor as part of refactoring shift, which is, I want to continue this today. One of the things I wanted was this find by SKU, and it uses these magic find by methods. So basically you can say find by any column name, and it basically expands that into the query, the where clause, and then the first of that, right? So what I found though was that while I was able to call find by statically elsewhere in the code base, when I was calling it within the product class, within the thing that was using this trait, this line specifically failed. It threw an exception that find by SKU was not available or was not defined. Now, there was a couple nuances that I picked up on right away. This was a instance method, meaning it was a method of the class. It was not a static method. That's what I'm calling an instance method. So it operates on the object itself. Now at first I thought, okay, well this isn't self, this is static, or blah, 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 right? None of that actually really ended up mattering. What it was actually a nuance of PHP. I'm not gonna call it a bug. I'll call it a nuance. I think the documentation calls it trickery. So here's the trickery. The trickery is basically that for magic methods only, okay, for magic methods only, when you are within what they call an object context, or in this case, an instance method, right? Then the order is, this function or method, let's call it method. So the order is the actual attempt at an instance method. Then it is call. Then it is call static. Well, it's actually not true. It won't actually end up calling call static. So when you're within an object context, there's basically, it looks for the actual real implementation of the method, of course. So let's actually leave that part out. So when you're within an object context, it is call, and then it is call static, right? Again, only for magic methods. Of course, if the real thing existed, it's just going to call it. That's why this line of code worked before I added this find by trait. When you are within, a static context, right, meaning this, then it will attempt to call static, right? So if I changed this method to static, it's not going to attempt to call. So this is the nuance. This is the trickery. Because I'm within an object context, this trait was being called, which we proved last time. This is a trickery. This is a nuance. This is a feature of PHP. Now, I don't know how many developers on the planet, especially any that have used other languages, would expect this to call the magic instance version, like the magic instance method call. That is a instance method. I appreciate that it's magic. If I write this, I would have never, clearly from my stream last week in my amazement, I never would have expected that to be called. That is just not how I would expect a language to function. Now, this isn't the first bit of trickery that PHP has. But anyways, that is what I stumbled upon after 25 years. I stumbled upon this. So my solution, let's talk about the solution now. Let me do composer update. Whoa, that seems wrong. I think I recently updated to like PHP 8.4 from 8.3. So something's wrong here. Let's do this. Let's do remove RMRF vendor and composer lock. And let's also do composer self update. I might just be out of date. Okay, that helps. Let's do composer global update. Let's just make sure we get all the latest fun. I think that Symfony polyfill stuff was causing some problems with React, maybe it looked like. Okay, let's try this again. Let's do composer update, fresh. Hopefully we don't get a million deprecation notices now. This might take a second though on the shipped code base. So anyway, let me check the chat. I heard some stuff bouncing around in the chat. Okay, cool. Hey Samuel, how's it going? Mateus, do you know why it got reverted? Maybe not specifically. This might not have been your particular PR, but I think one of the PRs opened up some of the classes, like it removed final or it removed read-only or something along those lines, and I just don't think Nuno wanted to do it that way. Yeah, you got to be careful when you're submitting. Again, this might not have been yours. So in general, if you're contributing to a project, you got to be careful. You really want to be as surgical as possible. You really just want to make your change in isolation, just that change. If you're doing general things to the code base, or if you're like opening up the code base in some kind of way, or if you're adding final, or you really shouldn't be doing any of that kind of stuff in your PR. If you can avoid that, I think it makes the PR a lot more likely to end up getting merged. So anyway, that might not have been your PR, Mateus. That's just something I remembered from the discussion. So anyway, let's go look at this find by. So once this comes into play here, and we're able to click through. Oh, okay, it's indexing. Let's give my iMac a second. This iMac is like a 2018 iMac. Let's give it a minute. So once this catches up, basically the way in which I have resolved this is I added a magic call method. So that way, no matter if you were in the static context or the object context, the right thing happens. So again, once this catches up, we'll see in my find by treat, once I can click it. We're so close. And then we'll continue on. Let's open this up. So let's go Laravel additions. There we go. Laravel additions. Okay, so what I want to look at today, we added this with fallback. So all this has been pushed out. It's in production. It's doing great. I want to try to look for this status. Is there any opportunity to use my new little status helper here? I like this guy. And then this safe save is maybe another one that I might end up looking at. So let's look at these two today. Once this catches up, it's caught up. Okay, so yeah, here we go. So I added this call method, which basically just says, hey, if you're a find by and you've reached a magic method that, you know, you're not going to be Laravel, you're not going to be anything else. You're not going to be a real method, of course, if you're getting called to this magic method, then it's going to perform this find by query. So they both just kind of do the same thing. So no matter if you call it from within an object context or a static context, the proper magic method is going to be called. And then while I'm not a big fan of comments, this is one of the few rare instances where a comment is helpful. Because again, while the find by methods are intended to be called statically, this magic method is required to handle find by calls from within instance methods. So I think another way to say this, more PHP, within an object context. Boom. And if we go and look at this, here was kind of my big Twitter diatribe of like me still learning it. And here's an example. Again, if you want to dig into this deeper, I'm actually going to put it in today's newsletter. But yeah, this kind of demonstrates that like call magic, you know, actually ended up calling this, right? Even though in do something I say static magic call, it ends up calling call, right? So just kind of a quick demonstration of how in a static context, if everything's static, then it's fine, it works. But when within an object or an object context or an instance method, in this case, not static, it'll end up calling call, which is just, again, not at all the way in which I would have thought PHP behaved. Whew. Let's get into some refactoring, shall we? Less griping, more refactoring. Okay. I'm trying to think of the best way. How can I don't know exactly off the top of my head where anything is as far as like reverting to the status or refactoring to the status bit. So there's probably a lot of places in the shift code base where I say like response, no content, and pass it something. I don't think there's many places where I probably respond with a raw status. But I think here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to search the code base for any like HTTP level integer codes, status codes, right? And let's just see if there's any opportunities to use the status helper. Because again, there's not a very heavy API on Shift. It's all web calls. So I probably am not returning any raw status responses anywhere, or at least not many. But little regex fun, right? That's always fun. It's fun for me anyway. Okay, let's toggle on regex. And let's look for anywhere I have a 200, a 400, or a 500, followed by 2 more digits. Sorry. Followed by 2 digits. There we go. Okay, cool. Can we narrow this any further? We're getting in comments here. Yeah, it's like 105 matches. That's just a bit too many. It'd probably be in parentheses. Here we go. Yeah, here we go. This feels better. Okay. So, yeah, here we go. There's actually a lot. So the aborts I can't do because those actually throw an exception and they triggered, the error page and it gets logged and blah. So the aborts I can't change. But a lot of these, yeah, this webhook controller, a lot of these I could actually return. Instead of response no content, I could say status 401. That should end up giving me the same thing, right? Okay, so let's do this. Does this have a test? It should have a test. Please have a test. You do. All right, good. Let's copy this test. Vendor bin PHP unit. Let's make sure everything's passing. And then we'll refactor this to the status helper. That's actually, it's worth getting on. It's worth getting on a bit of a horse here. Allow me to get on, you know, an OG developer tangent here. A lot of people throw around the term refactoring. This is a true refactor. Okay, if I'm going to be a bit snobby about it, right? This is a true refactor. I have a set of tests. They're currently passing. I'm going to make a change to the code only, and the test shall remain passing. That is refactoring. I am not changing the behavior as verified by my test. I'm not changing the behavior of the code base. Anything else is not really refactoring. Anything else is rewriting, or it's implementing a new feature, because you have to change the test or you have to write new tests to verify that change in the code. A refactor is not changing the behavior. It's purely superficial. It's an aesthetic change to the code, right? That's a refactor. Okay, so as proven by the fact that I'm green, I'm going to go green to green. Anything else would imply that I've done something wrong. Okay, end old man JMac tangent. Okay, so again, I shouldn't change the test whatsoever. What I want to change is pretty much anywhere we've got response no content in here. So what I want to do is anywhere we have this, we'll change it to status that. And if we look at status, really all it is a shorthand for response no content, right? Now it doesn't have the status implied as 204. Like if you look at content, the status is 204. So there is no implied status. So this assumes that you're going to do it that way, right? So if not is null, we're passing it. Okay, cool. Okay, so again, I should be able to go and run the tests and everything passes. And it does. There we go. True refactor. Okay, so just kind of looking at the code, you might say, okay, well, why am I not going to do like status 204 here, right? Why wouldn't I do that? I could. For symmetry, I could do this. But response no content in this case actually makes sense, right? I'm returning kind of an auxiliary status in these other cases. Status 409, status 202, status, like, that feels a little bit better. So again, for symmetry, you could say, you know, status 204, but I kind of like the response no content better. And that's probably one of the reasons that like this wasn't merged into core, is because this is just a helpful way some people might want to write it. Like, this feels nice to me. Return status, you know, 404, or return status 409 or whatever, right? And I could make these look a little bit better. I could say like status no content, and it achieves, you know, it achieves the same thing, right? But yeah, I don't know. Response no content feels craftier to me, or more human readable to me than status 204. And return status no content, I don't know. What does that mean, right? Return an empty status with no content? It doesn't read as well. So I'm gonna leave this is the bottom line. Okay, now that we've kind of proven that that works, I'm willing to do this a little more widespread. So basically, anywhere, we could go so far as to say anywhere we say response arrow, probably have to escape that, no content. What else do we have to escape? Probably that. And yep, that. What is it not like here? response. I'm trying to replace all of these. Is that not needed? Where are you breaking down? Response. Response. Is it no content? I thought it was response no content. Am I crazy? What did we just change? Yeah, response no content. Oh, it's a... Sorry. I forgot the parentheses on response. So we're saying response, escape, that, no content. There we go. And escape this, and it has to basically have some digits in there. We don't care so much anymore about the rest, because anything else would end up, we're going to trust the code that anything else would be a redirect. We do want to capture this. We need that value back, and then there's probably going to be a closing parentheses. And we can replace this with status $1 close parentheses. So now instead of return response no content 500, which again I don't think reads, it doesn't necessarily read as well. Like you're saying return a response that has no content with a status of 500, and I appreciate that we're getting like the named argument bits there, but in this case, again, the readability of it, return status 500, feels so much more clean to me. All right, replace all, boom. Okay, so again, we're gonna trust this based on the fact that it worked for the other stuff. So I'm gonna just go ahead and say git add app HTTP controllers. And let's see what else I kind of messed with. So we don't want any of the trickery there. We don't want any of that. And no, I don't want to do that. Okay. So let's do a git commit -m. We'll say, or well, git checkout -b, more refactors. Okay, now git commit -m, adopt status helper. Okay, we'll make sure that the whole test suite runs up top. Sorry, git push -u origin head. Let's track it and push it up. And let's go ahead and make a PR for this. Okay, cool. I'm gonna nah the rest of this stuff because that was just us messing around with comments, and I'm not gonna commit composer lock. All right, one more to do here. Let's refactors part Deux. That might have been German. I think this is French, which I also think I misspelled in my title, my stream title. So whatever. Yes. Okay, let's see if I'm using safe or validated. I want to see if I'm using safe or validated anywhere in the code base. So let's take a look at this. So let's do, we probably don't need a regex for this. Let's just say, oh my goodness, what are we drawing? Safe. Definitely not using safe in the code base anywhere. Am I using validated? That can't be right. Is this still on? No, it's not on. I'm not using validated anywhere in the code base. That's not true. Validated. That can't be true. Safe? Really? I'm always just building up raw arrays. Create. Yep. This is kind of the reason I built this. Yeah. Everywhere I'm like, I've streamed about this, so I'm not gonna gripe too long here. But like, this is kind of the reason I made this one, right? You're kind of always doing like form requests or something anyway, and a lot of the times when you're building up a model, you're doing it off of request data. Now, of course, request has, validated, or if you did I'm not even using it, but let's just find somewhere we've got, let's find somewhere we have like request input, for example. I definitely have some stuff like that. So let's take a look at like, where's something we might have? Repository controller. This is probably good. Yeah, destroy repository. Okay, so let's find store repository. Here we go. So when you have this and you kind of make sure all this stuff's in here, like a form request object, you now have, you know, request validated, right? But this just gives you an array, and a lot of times people take this array and they do some other stuff with it. And like down here, I'm getting request input, and I'm pulling out the connection ID, but the connection ID was probably, you know, determined somewhere up here or passed across in the you know, request. So the point is, I think for simple CRUD scenarios, definitely simple CRUD scenarios, you have the opportunity to just kind of take whatever was on that object and use it directly. And Laravel gives you this safe, you know, object, right? This little collection that you can do and merge things into and all that stuff. And I just think it's very, very underutilized. And one of the reasons I believe that it's underutilized is you can't pass it directly to Eloquent. I think you should. I tried to see that you could. And I also think that if you do pass this directly to Eloquent, then like you can avoid the kind of fillable and guarded, right? Because you have this quote unquote safe object that you're trusting in your application. Now, again, as I mentioned last time, this is very much a sharp knife. This is a very, very, very sharp knife. It's a big, sharp knife. So, again, I understand why it probably didn't get merged into core. But I would like to be able to write my applications this way. And as evident from the shift code base, even though I'm calling create like 47 times or whatever the, you know, search results said, you know, I'm always building up an array to do that. And I'm sure if I went in and looked at each one individually, like, you know, might not have to do that for all of them. Might be able to use this request, you know, safe. I'm not going to go through 47 instances on stream. I don't think that makes for a good stream. So let's see why these are failing. Dusk is always failing. Going to be converting to that soon. Okay, we've got, let's rerun this because that seems ancillary. I noticed on this Livewire bit, I get like a flaky test every now and then. I think I'm setting something in one of my tests, like with Livewire set, that maybe isn't like the right data type, or maybe it's based on faker data. I'm not sure. Okay, while that reruns, there is one more thing I want to look at. I think it's in team repository. Yeah. And this might be something the chat can actually help with. I have kind of what you could probably consider a virtual, what I'm guessing this is probably an attribute. It's probably an attribute that I need to kind of add as an accessor, right? I don't need a mutator, I kind of just need an accessor. But looking at just this code, you can kind of see what I'm getting at here. On this team repository, I kind of take some of the model data from team repository and I build what I call an SCS. This is what I call a shift connection string. And think of this much like the PDO connection string when you're connecting to a database using, you know, PHP's PDO library, right? Now, right now, this is hard-coded. But notice that any of these other things I'm looking for, like, they all make a new one each time. They basically effectively call this. So, like, I could rewrite this and effectively kind of dog food this as like this SCS that, right? And this should all still work. So that's a tiny refactor I could do right now. But what I'm wondering, and we can scroll the docs page if no one in chat readily knows this, but really I'm just kind of casting, what it feels like I'm doing to me is I'm casting an additional attribute to this SCS object. So I'm kind of doing like an object cast, which definitely exists. But I haven't seen something that can do like a compound object cast. And further, one that's an attribute. It's not actually casting like created at into a carbon date. It's casting an attribute, a virtual attribute, based on multiple model fields, right? So again, probably could be done, but I haven't, haven't seen that before. Hey, look, okay, cool. Everything passed. Nice. Or not everything passed. Sorry, my test passed. Dusk, forget you, Dusk. We're going to be getting rid of you soon. So let's do Laravel model attributes. And let's look at like accessors and mutators. Okay, there is attribute casting. Maybe, again, that might be... Okay, so an accessor transforms an eloquent attribute value when it's accessed. To define an accessor, so we define first name. So this kind of assumes you have a first name attribute, meaning a column, right? So somewhere in here, there's probably like, I'm assuming, where's like a virtual? Is it virtual? Might not be the right word. I'm probably thinking of Rails. I think Rails has like a virtual, quote unquote, virtual attribute. Computed values to be added. You will need to append them. All right, that's different. I'm not worried about serialization. I'm hearing the chat. Maybe somebody knows. Value object casting? Yeah. Yes. I mean, if this were a column on the database, I could definitely just use casting. Absolutely could use casting. What I'm curious about is, first of all, I need to get the right terminology. Let's go back up to Eloquent, and I'm looking for the right terminology for, I think attributes are kind of what they call columns in the database, right? But there's a special kind of attribute that you can make that's not strictly in the database. It doesn't map one-to-one to like a database column. I'm trying to find the right name for that. Accessors, so accessors is like, again, this is when first name attribute exists and it just passes it in and we do UC first. That's not what I'm trying to do. Building value objects from multiple attributes. There you go. That feels better. Okay, so address. Here we go. Okay, here we go. Binding value objects from multiple attributes. This feels better. Sometimes your accessor may need to transform multiple model attributes into a single value object. To do so, your get closure may accept a second argument of attributes, which will be automatically supplied. Okay. Accessor caching, even better. That was going to be my next question. When returning value objects from accessors, any changes made to the value object will, any changes made to the value object will automatically be synced back to the model before the model is saved. This is possible because Eloquent retains instances returned by accessors, so it can return the same instance each time it is invoked. However, you may sometimes wish to enable caching for primitive values like strings and booleans, particularly. Okay, to accomplish this, you may invoke the should_cache method. Okay, should_cache. Return attribute make get. Okay, if you would like to disable the object caching behavior of attributes, you may invoke without object caching. So it seems this is exactly what I want to do. Yeah. This is exactly what I want to do. So the way I would rewrite this, and again, notice I use the word rewrite. This isn't a refactor. I think this would end up changing the code slightly. because now instead of calling the SCS in parentheses, right, instead of calling this method, I would actually, so right now I'm saying like, you know, team repository arrow SCS, you know, ... right? But after I turn this in, after I turn this into an attribute, it would actually be that for the attribute to work correctly. If I called it with parentheses still, I'm gonna get the full on attribute back. So I think I would actually call this way is probably the correct thing to do. But this kind of, I could do this and I could cache it, right? I could do this and I could cache it. And then I would know that anywhere else I called SCS, it's just going to give me that. I'm never changing a team repository. I'm never changing these SCSs a different way, right? So yeah, I am potentially already accessing it that way. Team repository is a complex one because it actually does have an SCS column underneath, whereas other things don't. So this will take some more work, but I think the point here, though, was actually still pretty good. I think this is what I was aiming to find, and this was the learned piece right here: binding value objects from multiple attributes. I knew it was possible. I just didn't jump into the docs enough to find it. So I think this is an interesting refactor that I'll probably look into. Again, Shift is a very old code base. It was written 10 years ago. You know, the application started on Laravel 5.1. Some of these cool things, casting in general wasn't even available back in 5.1. So, and definitely not, you know, this level of accessor was not available probably, I think, actually until like Laravel 7, I think. So anyway, the point is, that's why some of these simpler things are not there. But in fairness, this is not going to be a true refactor. I think it's actually going to take me analyzing how I'm calling this in the code and make sure that I honor that. I think for now, this is kind of a true refactor. And for example, if I kind of did like add caching here, so I'm not building one up every time, that would also potentially be a true refactor, because it's an underlying implementation detail. It doesn't change the outward behavior of the rest of the code. So that might be something I look into for now, and then over time I could look into actually making it, you know, an attribute. But yeah, I think this is good. I think I'll make that. I'll add some caching, and I can touch upon that in a future stream. So I think next week, the quote-unquote refactor, or rewrite, will be moving from Dusk to the pest browser test now that there has been a tag of some of the latest features. So anyway, thanks everyone for joining live. I'll see you next Wednesday.